Elaine Saxby to move the motion.
I beg to move that this House has considered the legal protections of hedgerows, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Julie Elliott, this morning. I would like to start by welcoming the work of DEFRA and their consultation last June to ensure that there are continued protections for hedgerows after the end of cross-compliance protections this January. I would also like to thank the Minister for her engagement on this issue, and as an advisory board member of the Conservative Environment Network, I would like to thank them for their help with this debate. Our green and pleasant land has been a source of national pride for centuries. From the gentle rolling hills of my North Devon constituency, it is easy to see why. Here the land is a green patchwork stitched together by hedgerows. 85 MPs and peers are CPRE hedgerow heroes, and I am proudly one of them, continuously calling on the government to commit to significant hedgerow planting and restoration. The government has made many welcome steps on protecting hedgerows. The Environment Act of 2021 introduced a mandatory biodiversity net gain requirement for new development, along with local nature recovery strategies to target the best places for nature recovery and wider environmental benefits. In January 2023, the government announced a target to create or restore 30,000 miles of hedgerows by 2037 and 45,000 miles of hedgerows by 2050, under the refreshed 25-year Environment Plan. This target will result in 360,000 miles of English hedgerows, 10% above the 1984 peak. Other positives include clear regulations prohibiting the removal of countryside hedgerows without approval, and our countryside stewardship schemes help to maintain and restore over 10,000 kilometres of existing hedgerows and plant an additional 4,000 kilometres across the country. The countryside stewardship provides financial incentives for farmers, foresters and land managers to look after and improve the environment. Under the section BE3, Management of Hedgerows, farmers will be paid £13 per 100 metres for one side of a hedge, which is available for countryside stewardship mid-tier and higher tier, which will go towards improving the structure and longevity of hedgerows, whilst maintaining them as distinctive and historic landscape features. Whilst visually appealing, healthy hedgerows are also unsung heroes. Their roots absorb excess water and help to reduce the risk of flooding. Their leaves provide a source of shade in the summer and shelter in the winter for livestock. Their thick, tangled branches are home to countless iconic British species, from the humble hedgehog to bats, turtle doves and yellowhammers. Hedges are home to precious pollinators too, without which we'd all go hungry. Over 1,500 invertebrates, including bees, beetles, spiders and hoverflies, have been identified in hedgerows in the UK. Spring flowering trees and shrubs like blackthorn and hawthorn, often found in hedgerows, can be important sources of spring forage for wild bee species in intensively managed landscapes. And the National Trust were very keen today that I highlighted their annual Blossom Watch campaign, where blackthorn and hawthorn hedgerow blossom is some of the most spectacular to be found anywhere in our countryside. They highlight that since 1945, the UK's hedgerow network has shrunk by about 50%. This is concerning because hedgerows aren't just an iconic feature of our landscapes. They are also those critical habitats for our wildlife, clean our air, carbon capture, and help reduce flooding, as mentioned. And they welcome the government's target to create or restore 30,000 miles of hedgerows by 2037 and 45,000 by 2050. According to the government's independent advisor on climate change, the Climate Change Committee, hedgerows are also key to meeting our legally binding commitment to reach net zero by 2050. The Climate Change Committee recommended increasing their length by 40% by 2050, and studies suggest England's hedges could hold as much as 9 million tonnes of carbon already. Unmanaged hedgerows are estimated to sequester over 140 tonnes of carbon per hectare, compared with 169 tonnes for a 30-year native woodland. If hedgerows are properly managed, they can sequester even more, both in their woody stems and in the roots below. I am genuinely a believer that our farmers are the best custodians of our countryside. However, we've lost nearly 118,000 miles of hedgerows in the UK since the 1950s, as farmers were encouraged to increase the intensity of their production. And there are now... I will go away.
Giving way and congratulate her on securing the debate. Just when she's on the issue of the importance of the farming community and what they do to secure and promote and enhance the hedgerows in our nation. Would she agree with me that we need to do as much as we can to support them in that much needed task that people often forget about and take for granted quite often?
And I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention, and I agree entirely, and I'm going to come on to speak further about what more we can do to support, as I am home to a large number of farmers in my North Devon constituency. But there are now few legal protections to prevent poor management practices of hedgerows. I also know that whilst I was a councillor, without fail, every year I was contacted about the cutting of local hedgerows. The problem being that the lack of a landscape criterion means that locally distinctive hedgerows are not being protected, and local authorities are often powerless to retain them. According to CPRE, more than half of local authorities felt that existing exemptions for built development led to unacceptable or avoidable hedgerow loss. Prior to the UK's departure from the EU, cross-compliance rules governed eligibility for the EU's Common Agricultural Policy and provided basic environmental protections. Now that the UK has replaced the Common Agricultural Policy, or CAP, these rules cease to apply as of the 31st of January last year. It is worth noting that the majority of rules under cross-compliance are now covered by domestic legislation. However, whilst the 1997 hedgerow regulations protect some hedgerows from being removed, there are now no regulations to protect hedgerows from harmful management practices such as ploughing too close to their base, spraying them with chemicals, or cutting them at the wrong time of year. And this is perhaps an apt time to mention the no cutting period, because this weekend is the RSPB's Big Garden Bird Watch. This is the world's largest garden wildlife survey, and every year hundreds of thousands of nature lovers take part, helping to build a picture of how garden birds are faring in the UK. So if you haven't signed up already, that's something for this weekend. A no cutting period would ensure that hedgerows are not cut back during the important bird nesting season from early spring to late summer. Any reduction or loss of the no-cutting period would place severe additional pressures upon farmland bird species, which are already facing spiralling declines. The no-cutting period would benefit not just birds, but also bees. I've been speaking to colleagues and they have fed back that there is also a problem with highway authorities cutting grass verges and roadside hedges at the wrong time of year, as cutting roadside hedges destroys all the wildflowers when there are max benefit for bees to pollinate. But it is also important to recognise hedgerows do need management and to incorporate this into any scheme, as so many nesting birds are right inside the hedgerows to protect them from predators and not on the bits that need trimming. One of the UK's very rare bumblebees, the brown-banded Carder bumblebee, was spotted in Braunton last summer. We know that when we maintain road verges with pollinators in mind, it can create a network of habitat that can connect populations of bumblebees, allowing them to find suitable flowers to pollinate. I'd like to give a big thank you to Braunton Parish Council and the local volunteers at the Bumblebee Conservation Trust back home for their work in this area. Recent research by CPRE also found that planting hedgerows on arable land can boost production of pollinating insects, increase crop yields by 10% and reduce pesticide use by 30%. The study examined what it would mean for farmers if the UK's hedgerow network was expanded by 40% by 2050. And it calculated that for every £1 invested in hedgerows, farmers would see a £1.73 return from higher crop yields. A petition which has been supported by North Devon residents calls for all hedgerow cutting or trimming and non-essential tree felling should be banned between March and August to give declining bird species a chance to breed undisturbed by human activity. The 1997 hedgerow regulations offer a limited degree of legal protection, as these rules only apply to narrowly defined important hedges. Broadly, a hedgerow is considered important if it is at least 30 years old and meets criteria based around the number of plant or animal species it supports, historical significance and associated hedge features such as a hedge bank, ditch or tree. The 2023 DEFRA consultation on protecting hedgerows included questions about ensuring continued protection for hedgerows after the end of cross-compliance, which meant that to receive the basic payment scheme, farmers and land managers were required to maintain overall standards. For example, hedgerow management measures were included. However, despite the department holding a consultation last June on the shape of future regulations, no amendments have been made since their introduction in 1997. The government has yet to respond and missed its deadline last year to replicate the previous rules in UK law. I know the department has said that we are determined to protect and restore vital wildlife habitats and have recently consulted on continuing hedgerow protections after the end of cross-compliance and will publish a summary of responses as well as outline our next steps shortly. I do hope the Minister may be able to clarify when shortly is, as the delayed government response to this consultation risks a regulatory gap in the protection of hedgerows under basic hedgerow management standards. Farmers make countless sacrifices to produce the food we eat and care deeply for their land. They are as much a part of the landscape as custodians of it. Farmers are integral to rural communities like mine in North Devon. They help to stitch them together, create jobs and produce high-quality food, all whilst caring for our much-loved countryside. I will always champion our great British farmers and ensure that their voices are heard. I very much welcome the good news by the Secretary of State in January regarding the latest upgrades to the UK's farming schemes since Brexit to help support our farmers, including a 10% increase in the average value of agreements in the Sustainable Farming Incentive and Countryside Stewardship schemes. A streamlined single application process for farmers to apply for these schemes is also warmly welcomed. I am pleased that the process has just been simplified for British farmers to access, and these upgrades underpin the government's commitment to support farmers taking action to boost sustainable food production whilst delivering positive outcomes for the environment. Now that we are outside of the EU, we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create a bespoke system of farm support which better rewards them, protects our natural environment, and which is unique to our own national circumstances. The new environmental land management schemes are a step in the right direction. ELMS, as it's known, delivers much greater value for taxpayers' money and creates a new revenue stream for farmers to complement the money they receive for food production. ELMS also helps to tackle long-term threats to our food security by encouraging more sustainable farming practices and improving key assets for food production like soil health, water quality and healthy hedgerows. It was great to visit my constituent David Chugg's farm in Kings Henton with the NFU and see the work done to plant small trees into hedgerows as part of an ELMS scheme. I am glad that through the new ELMS scheme, farms like David's will have their management of hedgerows funded in recognition of their historical, cultural and environmental value to our countryside. The government's target is for 70% of farms to sign up to the Sustainable Farming Incentive by 2028, and I welcome the good progress that is being made towards this goal. However, even if this target is met and all those farms sign up to the existing hedgerow options, it is estimated that 120,000 kilometres of hedgerows would be left with little meaningful legal protection. The government's primary focus on incentivising good environmental stewardship over punitive enforcement is the right one. There are 3 relevant options available to farmers as part of the Sustainable Farming Incentive under ELMS, with payments on offers for the measurement, management and planting of new hedgerows. But some level of legislative protection for our most precious natural assets is necessary. For this reason, I urge the government to first update the hedgerows regulations to include protections against harmful management practices. This is essential to replace those protections lost with the end of cross-compliance. We should also broaden our ambitions and think more carefully about the type of regulatory environment we want to create. In 2018, my Right Honourable friend, the member for Surrey Heath, commissioned the Stacey Review. This review set out to rationalise the basis through which future farming regulations should be made to safeguard animal and plant welfare, ensure good land management and prevent hazards. Proportionate, smart regulation enables farmers to fulfil these goals, and the review contained a wide-ranging series of recommendations to strengthen and simplify regulation. Unfortunately, the government has still not issued a formal response, and I would now call on the Minister to do so. Farming is an unpredictable business. The hundreds of farmers whose land still lies underwater after Storm Henk are testament to this. It is our duty as policymakers to provide them with certainty and the tools they need to strengthen their resilience. North Devon residents have also signed a petition to make protection of hedgerows a condition of ELMS and BPS subsidies. We need to ensure that farmers have the confidence to engage with this process. And to ensure that farmers do have that confidence with ELMS, to restore our natural world and boost our food security, the government should, in my mind, at the very least, increase the current ELMS budget in line with inflation and index the future budget in line with future rises in inflation. Consumer price inflation ran at an average of 4.18% from December 2019 to October 2023. The £2.4 billion annual budget should therefore increase by at least £400 million to restore it to its original value. Whitehall could also be less prescriptive in the payments it makes available to farmers. I would like to see more market-based payment rates for elms, reflective of our environmental needs and the demands from farmers. Options with the greatest environmental benefits, or those with the lowest sign-up rates, should have their payment rates boosted to increase uptake. To meet the Climate Change Committee's recommendations to increase the length of hedgerows, this should include SFI options for the planting and careful management of hedgerows. Farmers also need greater advice on how to access the opportunities available. Speaking to farmers in my constituency, I know how important this is. I hope the Minister will look to appoint regional and local farm champions to provide peer-to-peer advice and training on sustainable and profitable farm practices. To sum up, here are a few suggestions I have for the Minister. To introduce a landscape criterion to the regulations to give local authorities more discretion to protect hedgerows that are important to local landscape character but may not meet the current criteria for importance. Improve the hedgerows regulations so that they are easier for local authorities to implement. Any simplification should strengthen, not weaken, hedgerow protection. Consider a closed season over winter for when hedgerow removal notices can be submitted to local authorities. This would allow comprehensive surveys of the hedgerow to take place as required before removal is permitted. But the key point I would like to stress is the need for those regulations that have been lost under cross-compliance related to the management of hedgerows. Whilst I know that hedgerow planting is not a silver bullet for agricultural carbon emissions, it can play a significant role alongside good soil management, agroforestry and uptake of low-carbon fertilisers. We have just found out that our Lib Dem-run District Council will miss its 2030 net zero target, having only reduced its greenhouse gases by 16% in the last 4 years. I hope we can, as a government, facilitate our farmers to fill some of the gaps the Lib Dems have left and secure, enhance and extend our stunning network of hedgerows across North Devon and across the country. I trust the farmers in North Devon to look after their hedgerows. They understand the link between good hedgerows, better biodiversity and improved productivity. But we must look at the next steps on protection. It is important that we boost our biodiversity to strengthen our rural economies and maximise the benefits of our beautiful countryside. We need to ensure that our hedgerows are legally protected.